Imagine sitting in a quiet courtroom, everyone waiting for the judge to speak, when suddenly the drama takes a shocking turn. This isn't just another HOA dispute. This is the kind of moment that no one could have predicted. The story begins with a young disabled girl bravely standing up against the local HOA who had been harassing her family for months. She came to court to finally have her voice heard, to share the truth, and to find justice. But before her words could even fully settle in the air, the HOA's leader, the so-called Karen, everyone in the neighborhood already knew for her outbursts, did something unthinkable in front of the entire courtroom. Gasps filled the room, people froze in disbelief, and the judge's gavel slammed down demanding order. What had started as a normal hearing instantly turned into chaos. The young girl's courage was being tested in the most public way possible, and the whole courtroom watched in stunned silence. This was no longer just about HOA rules or neighborhood disputes. This was about dignity, respect, and the way people treat those who cannot fight back in the same way. But the story doesn't end there. Just as tension reached its breaking point, the doors to the courtroom swung open. Every head turned, the atmosphere shifting in an instant. Walking in was someone no one expected, a man whose presence carried authority, power, and a history that few truly understood. The whispers spread quickly. He wasn't just her father. He was a high-ranking member of the CIA. His arrival promised that this battle was far from over, and what happened next would shock everyone even more. And this is exactly where the story begins. The room went completely silent as he stepped forward. His sharp eyes scanned the courtroom, locking onto his daughter, who sat trembling but determined in her wheelchair. No one had expected him to be here. People in the neighborhood had heard rumors about her father, but most thought it was just gossip. No one believed a man with ties to the CIA would live so quietly among them. Yet here he was, his presence filling the room in a way that made even the most confident attorneys lean back in their seats. The HOA members, who had walked into court that morning with arrogance, suddenly shifted uncomfortably. Their leader, the woman everyone called Karen, avoided his gaze, though her earlier outburst still hung in the air like a shadow. It wasn't just about what she had done. It was about what this moment revealed. This wasn't a simple clash over neighborhood rules or minor disagreements. Something bigger was hiding underneath, and his arrival suggested it was about to come to light. The judge, still trying to regain order, studied the man carefully. You could almost feel the tension between justice and chaos hanging in the balance. The girl's father didn't raise his voice or even say much at first. Instead, he walked calmly to her side, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. That single gesture seemed to speak louder than words, a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. People whispered in the back rows. Why was a CIA officer involved in a suburban HOA battle? Was this family hiding something deeper? Or was it simply a father stepping in to protect his child after the line had been crossed one too many times? The truth was unclear, but one thing was certain. The fight had only just begun. The silence in the courtroom grew heavier with each passing second. The girl's father didn't have to announce who he was. The weight of his presence told everyone enough. The HOA members exchanged nervous glances, their confidence starting to slip. It wasn't only the incident with the girl that was at stake anymore. It was the long history of harassment, the endless fines, and the petty rules that had been pushed onto her family. Neighbors in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, some recalling their own experiences with the HOA but too afraid to ever speak out. Now, watching this unfold, they wondered if the truth would finally be revealed. Karen sat stiff in her seat, her face flushing with anger, though her hands trembled slightly. She wasn't used to being challenged. For years, she had run the neighborhood like it was her personal kingdom, bending rules when it suited her, punishing those she didn't like. And the girl, with her disability, had been one of her easiest targets. But now, with the father standing by her side, Karen's usual control seemed to slip away. Still, she wasn't ready to back down, not with so much pride and power on the line. At the same time, whispers spread about the CIA father. Some said he had left the agency years ago, but carried secrets no one else could imagine. Others believed he still had influence, and that his very appearance here might shift the case in ways the HOA couldn't predict. Even the judge seemed more cautious, aware that this wasn't an ordinary dispute. Yet the biggest question lingered in the air. Was this really just about HOA harassment, or was there something hidden beneath the surface? The girl's bravery had started the fight, but her father's arrival suggested the real battle had yet to be revealed. The courtroom felt more like a pressure cooker with every passing moment. The girl's father finally rose to address the judge, his calm but commanding tone cutting through the whispers. He didn't accuse anyone outright, but his words hinted at something larger, something that reached beyond a simple HOA case. The way he spoke made it clear this wasn't just about neighborhood disputes anymore. He had documents in his hand, papers sealed in a folder that everyone's eyes kept drifting toward, wondering what truth they might hold. Karen's confidence began to crack. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering frantically, her face pale now instead of flushed. Whatever secrets she had buried were threatening to surface, and for the first time, she looked less like a leader and more like someone cornered. Yet her pride wouldn't let her stay silent. She stood suddenly, her voice trembling as she insisted that the HOA had acted fairly, that the family had broken rules, that everything was justified. But the crowd didn't seem convinced anymore. Even the neighbors who once supported her were shifting uncomfortably, glancing at one another with doubt. The judge banged the gavel, demanding order. But it was too late. The atmosphere had already shifted. The tension in the room was electric, everyone sensing that a breaking point was near. The girl, sitting quietly, lifted her eyes toward her father, drawing strength from him. She had come here to speak her truth, but now it felt like the weight of the entire community was resting on her shoulders. As her father placed the sealed folder on the table, the air seemed to freeze. No one knew what was inside, but the promise of what it could reveal left the room holding its breath. The climax was moments away, and nothing would be the same once it unfolded. The folder sat on the table like a ticking clock, and everyone's attention locked on it. The father hadn't opened it yet, but the weight of what it might contain was enough to rattle the entire room. Just as the judge leaned forward, prepared to ask what evidence he was presenting, the courtroom doors burst open again. A man in a sharp suit walked in briskly, carrying his own briefcase, flashing a badge that silenced the room. He wasn't just any attorney, he was a federal investigator. Whispers swept through the courtroom like wildfire. Why was a government official here? What did he have to do with a neighborhood HOA case? The investigator's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the judge, stating that this matter might involve more than local disputes. His arrival shifted the entire atmosphere yet again. Suddenly, the fight wasn't just between one family and an HOA. It hinted at corruption, misuse of funds, and hidden deals that had been covered up for years. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to protest, insisting this was irrelevant, that it was nothing more than a personal attack. But her panic betrayed her, and the neighbors began to murmur. Some remembered strange fees and unexplained increases in dues. Others recalled how Karen seemed untouchable whenever complaints were raised. Now, with the investigator in the room, it seemed those suspicions might finally be exposed. The father remained calm, his hand resting on the folder, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. The girl watched silently, her eyes wide, as the pieces of the puzzle began to connect. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about her dignity anymore. It was about uncovering a truth that could shake the entire community. The real battle was only beginning. The air in the courtroom felt charged as the judge finally allowed the father to present his folder. He opened it slowly, revealing documents that detailed years of misused HOA funds, secret contracts, and backdoor deals signed under Karen's watch. Gasps filled the room as copies of bank statements and emails were passed to the court. The neighbors who had once feared her now looked on with anger and betrayal. Everything she had built her power on was unraveling in real time. The federal investigator stepped forward, adding his own evidence to the pile, records from an ongoing probe into HOA fraud. It turned out Karen's actions had already drawn government attention, and this courtroom hearing was only accelerating what had been quietly building for months. The judge's face grew stern as the pieces connected. What began as a dispute over harassment had revealed a much deeper corruption. Karen tried to lash out one last time, shouting that it was all fabricated, but her words fell flat against the mountain of proof. The gavel came down hard, the judge declaring immediate action against the HOA's leadership. Relief washed over the girl's face, and for the first time, she felt the weight of injustice lifting. Her father squeezed her shoulder, a quiet reassurance that her courage had sparked the change. But just as the courtroom began to settle, the investigator glanced at the father with a knowing look. He leaned closer and quietly said, "We'll need to talk after this. Some of these documents trace back further than the HOA." The father gave a brief nod, his eyes narrowing, as if he already knew this fight was only a piece of something larger. The room erupted with chatter, but one thing was clear. The battle was won. Yet a bigger war was just beginning. As the courtroom slowly emptied, the girl sat quietly, taking in everything that had just unfolded. For so long, she had felt powerless against the HOA's harassment, each fine and threat chipping away at her spirit. Yet in this single day, the truth had been exposed, and the community finally saw what she and her family had endured. Neighbors who had once looked the other way now approached her with soft words of support, realizing they had been blind to what was happening right in front of them. Karen, once untouchable, left the courthouse surrounded by officials, her voice drowned out by the whispers of those she had ruled over for years. The neighborhood that once feared her would now move forward without her control, a reminder that even the strongest facade can crumble when faced with truth. The judge ordered a full restructuring of the HOA, promising transparency and accountability where secrecy had thrived before. For the girl, the victory wasn't only in the ruling. It was in proving that her voice mattered. She had walked into that courtroom expecting to defend herself, but she left knowing she had inspired change for her entire community. Her father's presence had given her strength, but it was her own courage that had brought the hidden corruption to light. Outside the courthouse, the investigator exchanged a final look with her father, hinting that deeper questions still lingered. But for now, that fight could wait. What mattered most was the moment they had won together. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the girl smiled for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just the end of a courtroom battle. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one built on justice, resilience, and the power of speaking out.